Ladies and gentlemen, we are now covering Justified, Season 1, Episode 8, Blowback. This is the episode in which we have a bit of a hostage situation going on in the marshal's office, among a couple other things. This is an interesting episode because this is obviously an episode of the week, thread of the week, if you will. But we also are really starting to focus on those long-term arc situations, something that we've been doing for several episodes now. This one's an interesting one to cover. First, we have the previously on, negative to story. So, we cut to Ava. She's just hanging out in a diner. And Bo just walks in and walks up and sits down to chat with her. Cute. And this whole scene is weird because it doesn't have the kind of tension that that I'm particularly fond of in this particular series. It's not tense at all. Quite the contrary. The word I want to use to describe what it is creepy. He sits down, starts chatting to her, talking about pie, talks about how sexy she is. It's really weird. This is his daughter-in-law, by the way. And then, of course, he takes her pie, just takes her plate of pie and starts eating it, and then talks about smelling it. Like, this whole thing is just, what? And it kind of gives you an insight into how creepy Bo really is. But I want you to remember this, because even though it's a bit of establishment for Bo Crowder, which, this is our second scene for him, so that makes sense, it also helps to serve as contrast for something later. No, Jesse Ward. No, he totally wasn't inferring he was going to have sex with his daughter-in-law. They would never do that in Harlan. Anyways, so, moving on. But we find out, and this is important, there's two really important things that happen in this episode. One comes up at about the halfway point, one comes up at the very end. I already told you the first thing. The second thing is he was let out early. They were going to have a few more months, but Hunter was someone who was involved in drug running. Now, this is actually true. If they find out that, especially a local sheriff, has been involved in some dirty stuff, it casts all of his arrests, all of the cases that he presided over, or he or she presided over, in a negative light, to the point where all of them have to be retried from scratch. We've actually talked about this concept briefly on this show, because it's actually come up before. You do not want tainted information or tainted data when it comes to a legal proceeding, because the result there isn't good for anybody. Like, let's to use a random made-up example, let's say that Cinematic Sith over there shoots a guy. And they're like, all right, we got all this evidence, and we do all the paperwork and gathering and pictures and all that, and we get to the point where we're starting to actually begin the investigation. Everything's cool, and then we bring them in, and then they're under arrest, and we're ready to start getting forward for a jury trial. And then we find out that something's wrong somewhere, that there is some tainted data or tainted information. So what they have to do is the case is then closed immediately, like that. And that case is now concluded. So if they want to do anything to Cinematic, the gun murderer, I shouldn't do that, I'm sorry. I can usually joke with most of my viewers, I shouldn't imply that. It's a joke, obviously. We'll say Mr. Red's the gun murderer. So if they want to do anything for Mr. Red, they have to start from scratch. Now in many cases, they will. But the problem is they have to really start from scratch. All the pictures they took, all the interviews they took, all the video footage, all the paperwork trails, all of that has to be started over from scratch. So that sucks. And it sucks for everyone too, because you'd think the person gets off scot-free, right? No, because they are very likely to go ahead and retry that. So you're let go to wait for the time at which they will then come back to rearrest you for the new crime they are charging you with. To start the whole process. It's a waste of everyone's time and money. Nobody likes it when that happens. Nobody. Not the prosecutor's department, not the judge's circuit, not the people who assist and provide the infrastructure for the judge's circuit, not the cops, not the sheriff's department. Nobody likes that. So, they look at this situation with Hunter, and they say crap. But what I find most amusing and interesting about this is they specifically decide to, anybody who had less than 6 months on their sentence, they decide it's not worth the time and money to reanalyze, to go back through it. That's the only thing that I find debatable here. Obviously, that's going to be a per county thing. Counties decide their own rules and regulations when it comes to this sort of thing. But several counties I've known when it comes to criminal justice would absolutely be willing to go through all of the expense and time and effort to gain another win on their marker in order to retry someone, even if they only had 6 months or less than 6 months left on their sentence. But in this case, they decided not to. Okay, sure. So Bo's out. That sucks. So Bo... They do, so that's the first interesting thing. And the second interesting thing, of course, is that Bo comes across as extremely creepy, but also threatening. He reminds me of, honestly, several characters from the Yakuza series, if you've ever played those games, where they're intimidating and abrasive and manage to smile to your face, while at the same time being kind of messed up in the head. And that makes sense, since for everything I've seen, Bo is a criminal, to go back to that recurring theme we've talked about this entire time. So, yeah, Trevor is actually a great example of that Lord Harriman from GTA 5, for those who never played it. Trevor is more than capable of being nice and affable, and is surprisingly intelligent. But he's also a raving lunatic who has no problem eating people and beating them to death with his bare hands, or boots, as the case may be. I can't wait to play GTA 5 again. That's such a good damn game. Anyway, so that sucks. Then we cut to Vasquez, who continues to be affable, personable, and completely on his job. It's rather interesting because he flat out says, "Do you want to have your lawyer present?" Raylan's like, "I'm sorry, what?" "Yeah, do you want your lawyer?" Some people do, some people don't. And what's interesting is he doesn't have to say this. Now, if this was coming from someone else, I would say this is a power move. Psychological thing, right? I'm trying to trick you into bringing your lawyer. I'm trying to trick you into thinking there's a problem here. I think in this case, and especially after having watched this episode, Vasquez is legitimately just giving some friendly offering, a friendly advice. If you want to have your lawyer, no problem. If you don't, no problem. Vasquez is the type of person I actually get along with surprisingly well in real life, but I'll come back to that, because we'll talk more about Vasquez in a minute. So then we see Wynn Duffy. Now, I'm watching these videos, these episodes, on Amazon. Now, I've been able to avoid pretty much every kind of spoiler, with a couple of noteworthy exceptions, and I've actually already been spoiled by this, because what Amazon likes to do is likes to share when characters are recurring guest stars. Like it gives a little bit of a pop-up, like this is recurring character, like it already did for Raylan's father, who I don't remember his name, but I know Raylan's father's going to be back just because of the fact that he's a recurring guest star, right? Same thing for Duffy. Now, I don't know anything about him whatsoever. I just know we're going to see him again. The actor playing him does a really good job of portraying a very specific slice of creepy. This is the threatening creepy. The kind of thing most people can't pull off. Steve Buscemi actually does this kind of character surprisingly well, to name another actor. In fact, the character I was most reminded of was Steve Buscemi's character, I can't remember his name, in, oh god, and of course now I can't think of the name of the film. Oh god, what's the name of that stupid film? Con Air. In Con Air, he comes across as a specific slice of creepy. Because, yeah, used car salesman is a great way to put it. But the thing is, usually used car salesmen aren't in any way intimidating. They are entirely the kind of person who you just step on because they're pathetic, right? That's also true in real life, by the way. But here what we have is the used car salesman who's coming across as just, hey, but also everything he says is a veiled threat. Everything. Every point he makes, every speech he gives, every specific bullet point, he lays at her. Up to and including the fact that he clearly, and I'm sure you got this, he clearly heard her come in because she wasn't quiet about entering her house. So he went out of his way to make noise so she would know he was there. Just to make sure that you knew. Conk. And he does. He doesn't overplay his hand at all. No overt threats, no specific details, has a business card, talks about security, talks about where she works. He gives all the right information. So, like I said, second type of creepy for the episode. We've already seen Bo, who's just gross creepy, and now we're seeing terrifying creepy. Like, this is the kind of person, like, this is a terrible example, but if I was playing D&D and my GM introduced a character like Wynn Duffy, I would seriously consider killing him on the spot or trying to, because I know immediately, every red alarm is going off saying, this is a threat. This is a problem that needs to be dealt with as quickly and efficiently as possible. I don't know anything about Wynn Duffy other than what's in this episode and the fact that he'll be back, but I'll tell you right now, this is someone who is higher level. We've been talking about that throughout this whole show. Most of the characters, most of the villains and antagonists and obstacles that we've had to cover through so far have been either low level or low mid, which is appropriate for a first season of any show. Obviously, not everything equates directly to levels, but most things do, really, in terms of competency, in terms of capacity, in terms of connections, right? Wynn Duffy, he's up here. Oh yeah, except the cartel, that's fair. Except for the cartel. Although even the cartel showed us the local incompetent boob, if you remember. Excuse me. So point being, this guy is clearly higher level than several of the people we've been interacting with so far. We'll be seeing where he comes from in the future. Twice, excuse me. That's true, Jesse Ward. They did that twice. Is the cartel. Anyways. So. Then we have Art talking to Raylan about his upcoming interview. Now, obviously, since you've probably seen this episode by the time you're hearing me talk about this, you know that the actual interview is going to be about the Boyd case, not the case about Tommy Buck or whatever his stupid name is. I think it was Tommy, the guy from the first episode, the guy that the whole series started with. So Art and Braylon are talking nonstop about the first guy, the Tommy Buck guy. It's like, okay, we got to deal with him. Don't give him anything. Don't make it look like you were maneuvering into him. Yada, yada, yada. Excuse me, Tommy Bucks. My bad. Thank you, Jesse Ward. So, and I love the way Art's talking about it, because Art acts like a lawyer as he's talking him through it. He's like, all right, what if he had somebody with him? What do you mean? He didn't have somebody with him. Yeah, but what if he did have if he had somebody with him, I wouldn't have sat down in the chair. Oh, so what you're saying then is you walked in there with the intent to shoot him. That is exactly how lawyers tend to walk their way around and through situations. Sometimes legitimately, mostly not. And he perfectly maneuvers Raylan into that, because Raylan wasn't thinking at all about the fact that Art was trapping him with regards to his word choice and his demolish. So Fradon says, don't let him get into what ifs. No hypotheticals. Don't let him trail you down a line of thought. Just answer the truth, and we're good. Which I find amusing, because if you think about it, Raylan absolutely walked into that situation with intent to shoot. He waited till the other guy pulled, but he walked in there to kill him. Anyways, remember that, by the way. That's going to come up later, too. Excuse me. It's not quite recovered. So then we have the thread of the week. Wallace. The actor who plays Wallace does a surprisingly good job at this. I feel bad for the actor because he probably had to get a temporary tattoo just for the one screenshot. That's not great. But so Wallace walks in, takes the guy by a shiv, and he talks to Art, and Art lies to him because that's what cops do. I'm not saying that to be derogatory or to throw shade. It's a statement of fact. It is in the handbook, so to speak, that cops are supposed to lie in order to maneuver situations. Now, whether that's good, bad, or in between, that's up to you. I don't care. Raylan doesn't lie to him, because Raylan doesn't do that. One of Raylan's shticks has been since the very first episode, and I pointed this out in the first episode, is that Raylan is just honest. He just goes right to the heart of the matter and says, yeah, this, shunk. And yeah, exactly, Crimson King. Boyd will talk around a situation. Raylan's like, here. Part of it's because he just doesn't have any patience for that. He just does not care. Let's go. So Raylan is quite straight with him. And so Wallace and him immediately establish a rapport. And Wallace is like, all right, I want to talk to you. Raylan, puts away his gun, everything's cool. We have a quick side thing with Vasquez and Art. Art says, I have given him an order to shoot that man if he gets an opening to do so. That's my call. You got me? And I love how that's portrayed, because this is honestly probably how it should be in law enforcement. Yeah, Vasquez arguably has a case on Raylan for the Florida thing, because he absolutely does have a case on Raylan for the Florida thing. But in this situation, that's someone going to Supermax, which is exactly as unpleasant as it sounds, by the way, with 4 consecutive life sentences, who has 2 guards in hostage in a threatening situation. I have given him the order to shoot if he gets the opening. Do you understand me? And Art makes it very clear. He doesn't actually come down hard because he doesn't need to. It's just very simple. This is under my jurisdiction. You get me? Vasquez's response is, yeah, no, I'm with you on this. If you need any assistance, go for it. Also, you notice Vasquez bothered to come up with the file on him, which was actually helpful. And he also helps resolve the situation with the SWAT team. I'm going to talk more about Vasquez in a minute, but I just want to do those things to be in your mind there. There's a lot going on in this episode, forgive me. So then Wallace and Raylan, they go back and forth. What's interesting about this episode is there's technically 2 duels in this episode. Every episode is a duel. There's the duel, which doesn't happen until the TAC team shows up, when SWAT shows up. But the other duel goes across almost the entire episode. The moment Wallace takes someone hostage, the duel has begun, and it doesn't conclude until he hands over his baton, his weapon. So we've got this huge swath of this duel, and it's an interesting, because it's not tense in the strictest sense of the word. It's not what you usually think of when you think of tension. Instead, it's more like holding your breath. The whole episode, everyone's just kind of holding their breath. Everyone acts differently. Great credit to the actors and the director, because everyone acts differently on the job, on the mission, as they should. This is a professional, dangerous situation. This is what they're trained for. They absolutely should be on point right now, and they are. So we established very early that Wallace is a despicable person. He is killed without remorse, and he made up a story about his daughter. But what's interesting is he reveals that he made up that story relatively quickly and easily, and it's also really obvious that he's lying. Again, yeah, the third duel is the fast food thing. We're not there. Yes, exactly, Lord Harriman. Great quote. The actor playing Wallace does a great job. I've said this before. It's harder than you'd think to act like you're acting badly. It's much more difficult to accomplish that than you'd imagine. Because what you have to do is, the end result is the character is acting. So you have to act like someone who's acting badly. And that extra layer is much harder to pull off than it sounds. So it's fairly clear that he's blowing smoke and he is acting. It's so obvious, especially in comparison to when he's being straight. When he plays it straight, his tone, his posture, his body language are all completely different. So he blows this story about his daughter. And it's like, no, it was this dude I killed. It was the first dude I ever killed. David Jerome or something. I don't remember the name. It doesn't matter. Hey! But then he starts segueing a little bit. There's 2 themes of this episode. Because one of them is creepy. We've already seen creepy with Bo. We've already seen creepy with Duffy. Now we're seeing creepy with Wallace, because Wallace is a creepy character. But you notice, he is a third and distinct type of creepy. This is someone who is what I like to personally call uncomfortably creepy. Usually because they're not, like, disgusting like Bo was. They're not terrifying like Duffy was. They just make you a bit uncomfortable because they're just a little bit too casual about things that are not considered socially acceptable. Now, I'm very vague about that on purpose because this could apply to a huge number of situations. Maybe it's someone who's totally casual about nudity or polygamy or what else is not socially acceptable. Of course, I can't think of anything else right now. You get my point though, right? It doesn't have to be something like this is someone who's cool with killing people, which it is in this case. It can be about whatever. It's just that little bit of... And yeah, you're not really comfortable explaining it. Yeah, exactly, Jesse Ward. So he does a very good job of that slice of it. But the other thing, the other theme of this episode is winning. He starts talking about what the guards did to him and do to people like him in prison. Vasquez later has a throwaway line. You start, I should have written it down. It's something like, you start the cycle of violence, it's hard to stop it, or something like that, right? Because the argument so often is, hello, Trihexia, that's the argument. The argument so often is, well, they're scumbags, so I'm not going to treat them like a human being. But that flies in the face of a lot of things. And I'm going to try very hard not to get preachy here. But let's just say that in the country that I live in, there's a lot of that problem in our jail system. Now, I'm not sure about the prison system. I'm actually not as familiar with prison. And prison is, let's be clear, very different from jail. But the problem is, here in the States, jail is almost universally worse than prison. By the way, guess which one has the larger percentage of people that go through and into it? Because they think it's okay. There's this general dominant mentality in the country that I live in, that it's okay to be harsh or painful or negative or derogatory or to treat them like scum when they are scum. And while that's an understandable perspective, from a completely detached mathematical perspective, it doesn't improve anything. Nothing is benefited by doing that. There's no positive there. The only thing that happens is more punishment for someone, which usually makes everything worse for everyone involved. I strongly urge you not to look into the kind of turnover rate that both jails and prisons have with regards to guards, because they go through some crap in there. And part of that is because it's totally cool and totally okay to go ahead and be completely awful to people. And what I love and hate about this episode, and this is such a perfect example of why I can't wait to be done with this series. No offense to this great and wonderful series and people who love it, but it hits a little bit too close to home. Because you think of prison guards or jail guards being awful or abusive, and your mind probably jumps to the overt stuff. The kind of stuff where someone just shows up and beats you over the head, or rapes you, or whatever, right? That's probably where your mind jumps to, the severe stuff. But that's not generally how it goes. All of the stuff Wallace said is stuff I have personally experienced. Except for the oven thing. I know that exists, though. Everything. The way they do the sounds. The way they try to just treat you like an animal. The way that they rap on the wall, or the way they try to disturb your sleep schedule, or the way they force you to eat certain things at certain times, or the way that they just screw with you. They just screw with you. Because you're scum, after all. And, as Imperial Star Destroyer points out, they have a pretty harsh job too. It's not like I am devoid of sympathy for these guards, but you see why it's called a cycle, why it's bad for everybody involved. Both prisoner and prisonee are experiencing a worse life because of this cycle of it's okay to screw with them. And Wallace talks about a few individual specific things, which once again shows that research, that these people do actually do their research when it comes to this show. And it is disturbingly true. Meanwhile, we cut over to Winona. Credit to the brilliance of the directing and the blocking of this episode. Did you notice this is a bottle episode, by the way? Did you catch that? I mean, bottle episodes are a little bit different when it comes to real life fiction, as opposed to, science fiction or fantasy fiction or whatever. But the concept of the bottle episode still applies. The overwhelming majority of it is just a few characters acting off of each other in one set, with a couple of little side things off the side. And it's doubly funny. It's doubly funny because if you paid attention to any other show I've ever covered, bottle episodes tend to be some of the best. And it's probably because of the fact that they focus so much on the acting. The acting has to carry the episode, so it does. Anyways, so we cut to Winona. And she is just sitting in her room. She hasn't left. The kitchen. She's just sitting there with a glass of mostly empty wine. That's it. That's all you have to do to establish the scene. We know immediately just how bothered she is by all of this, just how much this has gotten to her. That there's just... And it makes sense. A stranger, a creepy stranger who was terrifying, shows up in her home, unannounced and uninvited, announces himself to her, threatens her very innocuously, and then leaves. Well, after mentioning several things like the fact that he knows where she works and all sorts of other fun stuff like that, you tell your husband I was here. Okay, that's terrifying. I know people in real life who would go to a hotel after something like that and just nope out of that situation, that they would not feel safe enough to sleep in their own house after that. I don't blame them. So she's obviously very bothered by this. And then she starts talking to her husband. And this is the exact moment where I start to hate her husband. Because he does something that I actively hate in real life. It's when you double down on the lie, even though it's really obvious you're lying. Even though all of the information... Yeah, no kidding, Lord Harriman. All the information is there. You're the kid who has your hand in the cookie jar. And you're saying, no, I wasn't taking any cookies. Your hand's in the cookie jar. I wasn't going to take any cookies. What are you talking about? And I hate that doubling down. It's something I've actually talked to my niece about. It's like, no. You're not in trouble for trying to take the cookie. You're in trouble for lying to me about it. And there's other more long-term things about that I won't get into. And yeah, you could tell he's 404ing a little bit. Just a bit. You could tell he's a bit wigged out about this. But the fact that he stonewalls her, just absolutely... Okay, fair, Lord Harriman. I'll give you that one. He stonewalls her so hard, I wanted to slug him. And she keeps throwing evidence in his face. And I kept waiting for the moment when he would go ahead and break, when he'd just tell her the truth. He never did. She mentioned something. The one thing that doesn't scan is you're not concerned about me. His reaction? Immediate deflect. Oh, I've got an out. He then steers the conversation over here. Oh, I'm totally concerned about you. No. She cuts right through it. Similar to Raylan, by the way. Cuts right through the BS. No. No, you're not worried about what he could have done with me because you know what he's here for. And she's right. Oh, how would you know about that? Well, I checked your emails. Oh, okay. Then he starts doing another typical tactic. He flips the conversation onto her, like she's done something wrong. Now, in the interest of fairness, reading someone else's emails could be considered wrong under some circumstances. You know what a circumstance is where that's not considered wrong? When it's your husband. Now, admittedly, I'm speaking a little bit more legally than morally, but the fact remains, there's nothing really wrong about her double-checking her husband's emails after she's already tried to talk to him about the problem and after he's already given multiple indications that something's up. She's at step 3 here. You know what I mean? This is not some jilted lover or someone who doesn't trust her boyfriend deciding to check his phone messages. This is, hey, let's talk about this. No. Hey, what's going on with this? No. Okay. What's at this step? Yeah, this is, and we also find out this is why she gave that list of names to Raylan. Cute. Excuse me. So, she is very in the right on this, and he tries to make it into that she is the criminal, calls her Marshal as an insult, also calls her officer as an insult. Cute. Completely deflects this. And, this is important, never actually admits anything. I wanted to slug him. What's funny is I could tell you right now pretty much the entire puzzle. Because Winona didn't like the, let's call it the intellectual instability of being married to Raylan. Because intellectually, she knew that he worked a very dangerous job, and there always might be that one call or that one mission which he won't come back from. But Raylan also provided a great deal of emotional stability, because he was professional, he was competent, he knew what he was freaking doing. And he probably made damn sure that she was taken care of and okay. Tell me Raylan wouldn't do that. So now we see, yeah, exactly, Jesse Ward. Now we see why, God, I don't remember his name. What's her husband's name? We see why Winona is with her husband, Bob. We're going to call him Bob because I don't know his damn name. It's because of the fact that he is the total inverse of that. No emotional security whatsoever. In fact, you can tell in every scene the two share, there is no particular, let's call it spark between the two. Now, maybe that's down to the actors, and maybe that's deliberate choice on the writers and directors, but it's clear, I don't want to call this a loveless marriage so much as a mundane marriage. It's fine. It's okay. Because there's a lot of intellectual security about going ahead and marrying someone who is safe and boring and ordinary. He just works in the real estate business. There's no issues here. Yeah, it's a 9-to-5 marriage. And that, I swear, I don't really mean that as an insult. I really don't, because I'm 40 years old. I've been around the block a few times, and I understand that not every marriage can be what a marriage should be. And I'm willing to say that. It's my opinion. A marriage should be the kind of marriage where there's spark and passion and love and joy. But this is real life, and you can't always have that. So there's nothing necessarily wrong with settling for a 9-to-5 marriage, because a 9-to-5 marriage is only the second best type of marriage, which means it's actually like the 5th worst, because it goes down from there, right? There's all kinds of marriages much worse than a 9-to-5 marriage. Trust me. Not personal experience. Rings on this finger. Yeah, and now here's the problem. Because, again, the construction of this is all beautifully exposited upon without them actually sitting and staring at the camera and being like, so you see, we need to act. No. What we've got here is wonderful exposition, because we now understand Bob, whatever his damn name is not a 9-to-5er. He is into something. Duffy was here for a frickin' reason. I love how I can remember his name, but I can't remember the husband's name. The husband, Bob, he's into something. He's into something he shouldn't be. He's in over his head. I guarantee you all 3 of those things are true right now, and I don't know. Don't spoil. I don't want to hear it. But I guarantee you that I'm right. Because the episode has gone so hard into establishing this in 2 scenes. Actually, that's not quite true. It's actually more like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A grand total of 5 scenes in 2 episodes, if we want to get really nitpicky about this, has perfectly established this situation. And I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes, because you know Raylan's going to get involved in that. Meanwhile, scroll down a little bit here. So then we cut to Tim being awesome for the best episode, or excuse me, the best scene in the episode. I'm officially requisitioning this kitchen ticket for the U.S. Marshals. Now, what's really funny, there actually is legal capacity to do that. That is something that a U.S. Marshal or a police officer can do. It's just usually it's for something like a car or like a bike, something for transportation, maybe a weapon of some kind, maybe being able to defend themselves in some way. You don't usually requisition a bag of chicken. But I love it because, once again, this isn't cartoony. That actually tracks. And it also makes perfect sense because that's what Raylan's going for. So then the TAC team shows up. Now, here's the deal. I'd say at least 50%. And that's been going up, Lord Harriman. High odds of shooting the husband. So here's the deal. When you call in the SWAT, for those of you who don't understand how this works, SWAT team, the TAC teams, they're there to resolve a situation that has already gone past the point of resolution. Now, that's a weird way to phrase that, but that's kind of the legal definition of the SWAT's job. You don't call the SWAT when there's a hostage situation that you're trying to defuse. You don't call the SWAT when there's a bank robbery that might be happening or has gone badly. You call the SWAT when the situation has become untenable, and it's their job to resolve it through force. That's their job. I did notice that, Jesse Ward. That was pretty funny. So TAC team shows up, and Yeah, exactly. Imperial Star Destroyer. Exactly. It's why there was such a huge legal push against swatting people. It's because swatting someone is legally attempted murder. And it should be considered that. Because it is. You call in SWAT on someone? You are calling in people with guns who are going into a hostile situation, and their safeties are not on. People have died to that. So TAC team shows up. Credit to the episode's duty, thing. A lot of people. This goes into the boxes debate, Lord Harriman. You remember I've talked about that before. Each particular division, each office has their own box, and that's supposed to be their thing. It's a byproduct of that same system. The SWAT team box you're not supposed to even enter until you've already reached the point of untenable, and then that becomes their jurisdiction, their box. Can you even see what I did? I should start raising it, because I know the camera's a little higher up than I'm used to, and I noticed on one of the VODs I was gesturing something down here, and you can barely even see my hands. I'll start trying to remember to do it up here. Anyways, so they show up, and credit to the episode's duty, the TAC team is portrayed in a weirdly positive light. And I mentioned that because it's astonishingly common that this kind of situation where the external force, which is in many ways the antagonist of the situation, is portrayed in a negative light. The easiest example here is Die Hard 1 and the FBI. Now, that's a trope, and I'm glad that they avoided it here, because it doesn't really work here. The SWAT team is just here to resolve this situation. Boom, the end. You've got 2 minutes. Let's go. We're setting up. We're going to breach. There's probably going to be some death. They know that. The whole reason the SWAT guy is willing to give them the 2 minutes is specifically because of the fact that they know that when they breach, there's probably going to be a death. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. So, this begins the actual duel. I mentioned that we had the long duel. Well, we got a duel in the duel, and that's the moment the SWAT team shows up. Because Raylan now has a completely psychological duel with Wallace. I was honestly on the edge of my seat this entire scene, because winning the duel, and this show has done this so well so many times, has always been more up here than it has been here. Raylan doesn't even draw his pistol this entire duel. He doesn't need to. He's trying to talk him through it, because there's a couple of interesting things that Raylan hits the nail on the head immediately. First of all, fear of death is more powerful than you'd really think. Really. Fear of death is strangely strong. It's because, like it or not, we as people have extraordinarily powerful survival instincts that tend to take over, especially when the brain starts to shut down. Yeah, it's one of the reasons why suicide is such a thing, and why most suicides, statistically speaking, probably, we don't know for total certainty, shouldn't have happened. Heat of passion suicides, I've talked about this before. It takes a second to pull a gun trigger and kill yourself. But if you have a moment to think about that, a lot of what you are as a person starts to push back against the idea of pulling that trigger, right? It's a whole thing. I'm not going to get into it. Point being, fear of death is very powerful, even when you seemingly have no reason to keep bothering, when you are living a life worse than death. But there's another thing here. Winning. Wallace has entered this situation because he wanted to screw over the guys who screwed over him. He wanted to win this engagement. And he probably does in several ways want to die. But Raylan gives him this out. Gets the chicken, love the chicken. Gets the bourbon. What bourbon? It's in the thing. Oh yeah, sure. He gives him the out. Exactly, Jesse Ward. It doesn't matter how petty or pathetic or inconsequential that victory is. We as people have an innate need and desire to win. The next time you're driving, pay attention, really pay attention to how other people drive. And I guarantee you that unless you're driving like a really, really short distance, you'll probably see at least one interaction of two drivers on the road, possibly including you, where the other driver wants to win that engagement because it's ever present. It's always there. wanting to make sure you get ahead of the other person, or you're the one who gets to turn first, or refusing to back off even as the lane is going away. It's all about winning. And he really wants to win this engagement. And in this case, that is exactly how accidents happen, Venters. I guarantee it. I have no statistics there because nobody keeps track of that kind of information. But I've been driving since I was 14. And I am a damn good driver. And I guarantee you, because, you know, I need to go out of my way to pay careful attention while I'm driving, because I understand how terrifyingly dangerous driving is, that there's a lot of situations where I have seen near accidents all over the place. I've also seen accidents all over the place because someone needed to win. I don't remember Snake and Raiden in 4 wanting to win. I don't remember that one, Zach Taft. Forgive me. Did they fight in 4? God, it's been a while. I remember he was the cyborg in 4. So, chivalrous driving. Yeah, it's harder to do than it sounds. I am a very good driver, but that's not really bragging. It's extraordinarily stressful because I'm paying a huge amount of attention to everything constantly. You know why I didn't die last January? It's because I'm a damn good driver, and I had less than a second to respond to the situation, and I did, because I was paying attention, and I knew the scenario in order to make that snap judgment. Odd. Driving sucks. Anyways, I'm getting off topic here. Point being, winning. You see this in grocery store lines. You see this in the office. You see this in fast food. The human nature, the human desire to win is a whole thing. And in this case, it's very obvious that Wallace getting to have that fried chicken and sit and chat like human beings, that's winning. That's why he capitulates. That's why he turns it over. It's good spicy chicken. It's not quite what's-a-figs, but it'll do. He lets him go. And Raylan, as usual, is very straight with him. These men are going to take you. They're not going to be gentle. There's nothing I can do about that. You're going to be here for 3 days during your hearing. During that 3 days, you come by here. I'll sit and chat with you like a human being, and we'll eat chicken. Winning. And so Wallace won that duel. Did you notice that? Maybe he shouldn't have. That's debate. That's judgment. I'm not willing to pass that. But he did win that duel. But Raylan also won that duel because Raylan wasn't trying to duel Wallace. Not really. Raylan was playing the game. He was playing golf, not playing chess. Sorry, I should explain that because a lot of people don't know that. If you've never played golf, you're not really fighting the other golfers. I mean, yeah, you compare scores, but you're fighting the course. The course is the obstacle you're trying to overcome. And that was Raylan. He was trying to overcome the situation. No one dead. And that was his goal. He even said that flat out. So he wasn't fighting, he wasn't dueling Wallace. He was dueling the hostage situation. Yeah, golf. Where the goal is to play golf as little as possible. Yeah, this time everyone lives. Anyways, so we see some interdepartment cooperation, and yeah, Raylan's actually a very good negotiator. Doesn't lose his tone, doesn't lose his cool, and he talks quite honestly. Now, it can be argued that some cases you don't want to be honest with someone. That's debatable. It depends on the situation. However, I will say that in my personal experience, and I've been analyzing people since I was a kid, most people react positively to honesty. To you just being straight with them, like Raylan does. It's why Raylan connects with so many people so consistently. It's when he's being straight with them. You remember my personal favorite duel, which was him and the wife when he was going after the fugitive? You remember that? It was the B plot of that episode. It was the best part of that episode. The way he pushed through that particular duel was he was quite honest with her. I'm wearing a wire. I'm not here alone. Those are your kids. And if you want this situation to go well, then what you need to do is you need to cooperate and put that gun down. And that way those kids will have at least get their mother. They're not going to get their father. I'm not going to lie to you, but they're going to keep their mother. I hope he did, Lord Harriman. I mean, we never find out, of course, but I hope he really did sit and just chat with him. Just spend some time treating him like a human being. So then we cut to the Vasquez scene. This is already a great episode. This is already, at this point, easily a red. But then Vasquez, who has been established before and is being established throughout the whole episode as being helpful, on the job, competent, knew what to say, knew how to say it, assisted with the SWAT situation, all kinds of funny stuff. He has been very competent and positively inclined. He is clearly what we would normally call a protagonist. And then they say, let's go ahead and do it right now. It's like, okay, sure. And then he drops the hammer on Raylan. And he says, here's the situation. His demeanor, his tone, his body posture completely change. 100% change. He is now on the job, and he is dead serious. And he's right. Because the slam here, the plot twist, is his case has nothing to do with the Florida case with Tommy Bucks. It entirely has to do with the Boyd case. Vasquez is very businesslike, lays it out very thoroughly, and he is absolutely correct. In this situation, there is no resolving this. Boyd is going to walk on a plea. He's going to go ahead and plead to the gun charge, because he had a gun unlawfully, which they do have him on, definitively. And then he's going to walk, because we have no other hard evidence other than your tainted, not confession. Testimony. There we go. We have only your tainted testimony, which is not really admissible as evidence. It's not going to hold up against his lawyer. So he's going to walk, and we're going to pray he doesn't sue. That's it. Vasquez lays it out as bluntly as he possibly can. And what's most interesting about all of this is once he's done, yeah, no kidding, Lord Harriman. Once he's done, he goes right back to being affable and friendly. I'd stay away from Boyd, and I'd stay away from her. Now, pause. Because the very next scene is Raylan greeting Boyd as he gets out of prison. Oh, by the way, sorry, Trihexia asked earlier, what's the difference between prison and jail? The biggest difference, prison is where you go after you have been convicted of a long-term crime. Jail is where you go for any other circumstance. If you are a bum who is homeless, who gets picked up off the street, you go to jail. You're not generally... Okay, I shouldn't say that. Under some circumstances, you won't even be charged for that. There's no criminal anything. They will just hold you in the jail overnight. They've also got something usually referred to as the drunk tank. That's where they put people who are exceptionally inebriated. That's also in the jail. Usually also doesn't involve a charge. If you are charged with a crime, not convicted, charged, you go to jail for that. Sometimes. There's a whole bunch of situations, but that's my point. Jail is this, and prison is this. There's also differences in how the two operations are funded. Jails make more money the more people they have in them, which I don't think I need to say anything else about that. Jails also usually have to fight for budget, whereas prisons are usually funded at the state level and occasionally at the federal level. But jails usually have to fight and bicker and try to justify any kind of budget they get, and it's this whole thing. So that's why jails are very different than prison. A lot of people have gone to jail. In fact, the statistic, and I don't have it in front of me, but I was looking it up just a few weeks ago. The statistic is insane and getting worse here in the States about the number of people. Like, if you take into account everyone that's ever been arrested, the number of them that go to jail is like this chunk up here. Oh, right. Raising the hands, raising the hands. And the people who actually get convicted and then go to prison is down here. Some of these people aren't even convicted of anything. Like me. So anyways, yeah, I have some personal experience here, but I also have a lot of, I did my research. experience here, because I took it seriously and I got down and I hit the books, literally. I also had a lawyer who was very helpful about that. But anyways, so, point here being, that's the distinction. So, Boyd is getting released from prison. Cool. That, honestly, kind of sucks in its own right. As Boyd is getting released, Raylan shakes his hand. Boyd is a creep. Got to keep that creep vibe going. In this case, it's the socially unacceptable creephood with regards to the guard. Cute. And the two just chat for a bit. And I'm not going to say much more about this because, as usual, Boyd and Raylan are just gold every time they're on screen together. But what I want to talk about here... Yeah, Boyd does the pose again. What I want to talk about here is that this situation is 100% Raylan's fault. Raylan is completely in the wrong here, did completely the wrong thing, knowingly, and as a direct consequence of that, has ended up in a situation where he has allowed Boyd to go free. A murderer. What's interesting is if you're paying attention, this ties into the thing I mentioned earlier. I hope you remember that. Because Raylan is also responsible for Bo going free, early at least. Now in that case, it's a little bit less on him and a little bit more on Hunter. The fact remains, Raylan's actions have now started having consequences. You know I love consequences in fiction. You know, that's an interesting point, Jesse Ward, because, yeah, usually the villain has some resources, right? But Raylan actually has access to far more resources than Boyd does. So in one episode, these two are out because in a typical show or game or book or movie where you've got the rogue cop who's trying to do what's right, they're in the right. They're Janeway. Points if you get it. What they're doing is correct, and so things work out for them. What this show is doing is a little bit more of a realistic take on that. What they're doing is arguably right, but because of the fact that they're doing it with disregarding consequence then smashes them in the face. And we're starting to see more and more of those consequences crop up as a result of Raylan's actions throughout the show. And what I find most interesting about this is this in no way diminishes the fact that Raylan is a good person, who is clearly the protagonist here. He is the hero. It's just that real life is more complicated than that. And so Raylan's kind of butting heads with reality. What I also find fascinating here is he went to see Boyd on Boyd's release. Mostly just to threaten him. Also to shake his hand. Mostly to threaten him. No, absolutely, Jesse Ward. Yeah, real life usually doesn't let you be the Mario. Bingo. But then he gets a phone call from Ava. And doesn't pick up. So now I gotta rate this one. I'll pull up my sheet here. Blowback. Yeah. I mean, I've already stated my opinion that red is the floor. It's a damned shame that this show hits me so hard in places I cannot tolerate. Because this is a damned good show. This is a damned fine cup of coffee. Yeah, this might actually replace the collection for me as my favorite. And I liked the collection a lot. Because we have almost all the same hallmarks, right? Very, very good guest star with Wallace. We've got background arcs moving forward. We've got an excellent plot of the week, thread of the week. An amazing duel, probably the second best duel in the whole show so far for me. We've got incredible tension, we've got competency, we've got great co-interaction. Vasquez is firmly established as a character here in a very well done way. Like, this is just good. Pretty much top to bottom. The extra oomph for me... Well, okay, so I know exactly what the extra oomph is for me. Let me pause. Let me end that sentence there, period. Is there an extra oomph for anybody else? I guess is my question. Because I know exactly what it is for me. Yeah, where'd the bourbon come from? Ah, some teenagers put in my desk. Yeah, by the way, you're not supposed to have alcohol in the office. That's true if you work at a fax company. Never mind the marshals. Like, no joke, Art could actually get fired over that. Which I find fascinating because essentially nobody involved really calls attention to it. They all pay lip service to it. Oh, yeah, I don't even know where this bottle of bourbon comes. Weird. Weird where this came from. Shrug. Even the SWAT guy. And SWAT people tend to be a lot more by the book. They're like, no, I'm good. Yeah, for me, it's the final duel. The duel between Wallace and Raylan. Or more accurately, between Raylan and the situation. Talking Wallace off of the shelf, or off the cliff, or whatever you want to think about that. That pushes it for me. Possible, Jesse Ward. Generally speaking, most SWAT teams don't expect to go into a situation and have everyone live through it. That's not me trying to throw shade, that's just truth. So I think a purple is justified here. No pun intended. 2 purples in 1 season. That's already impressive, if I'm being honest. Next episode's called Hatless. I'm going to have to do this next episode.